If you can become deadly accurate with your wedges, you're going to be able to get yourself out of trouble, make the most of your great drives and see your scores start to come down. But how do you become a master of the short game? Well, we've enlisted the help of Ping as well as leading short game coach James Ridyard, going to give you some advice on how to get the right wedges for your game and also show you how to use them correctly. We've come here to the custom built short game area at Pavenham Park Golf Club. Let's get started. Right, so James, one of the shots that every golfer wants to play is that really high spinning shot. We see it on the PGA Tour week in without. That's that showstopper.
Yep.
But I think a lot of golfers get this wrong and they see their chip and pitch shots running away from the flag. So what are the things golfers need to consider when it comes to creating more spin around the greens?
Right, well, it would be easy to jump in and just assume that it's technique, right? But that's overlooking probably the most fundamental piece, which is actually your environment.
Yeah.
And by environment, I mean the quality of the club you're using. Obviously, clean club, good grooves, good conditioned face, so no damage to it makes a big difference. Then the ball needs to be soft enough to actually spin. Then the third piece is that thing that you can't control, and that's the environment you hit from. Okay, so any kind of longer grass, any kind of moisture in there, any kind of dirt, it's going to be very, very difficult to spin the golf ball. And another part of the environment that maybe you don't consider is the landing area. So whether the green is above or below you is going to make a difference to how quickly the ball stops. If the green's above you, the ball's going to come in flatter and go forwards more. If it's below you, it's going to come in steeper and stop faster. Then we have the actual slope here hitting onto. So we have a slight downslope here, unfortunately, which is going to make my ball kick forwards a little bit faster than if it were flat or into an upslope. Two things technically. Obviously, first of all, quality contact is primary. Like if you're going to hit it too hard in the club face, you're going to have an issue. To the heel, you're going to have some problems generating spin. All right, so quality contact's massive. Relatively low on the face, kind of the lower grooves. I'm not going to pick a groove number, but low is better than high. The second thing, and this might be a little bit technical, is your spin loft. Now, if you consider a driver and it being the lowest spin club in the bag, we have this thing called spin loft, which is the loft you deliver, so up here, and your attack angle. With the driver, they're very, very close together. As the loft increases throughout your set, the spin loft increases and the spin you see increases as well. Obviously, the top end of that is going to be your most lofted wedge. At setup, we'd really be looking to make sure that you are maximizing loft. We're not talking flop shot open, but probably some degree open. Even with a 60 here, I'm going to open it probably 5-10 degrees to get it up to maybe 70 odd. Because the reality of things is, when I come into the golf ball, I am still going to deliver some degree of shaft lean. Okay, we want that shaft leaning forwards for our quality of contact. Yeah. So opening the face to some degree means we still deliver high loft. I'm also going to cut across it just a little bit, because like I said, any kind of draw is going to reduce spin. You think about the long swing, same kind of example. If I'm going to hook something in, it's going to run. Generally, if you slice it, the ball stops pretty quick. Okay, so relatively narrow. Ball would be probably up just under my left chest. Knowing that I want to be pretty shallow, I'm going to make sure my swing stays relatively wide, and I keep loft on the golf club.
We're going to that far pin there, second from the left. Nice and high, a little bit of grab, and pretty good considering we are pitching onto a slight downslope. There you go. So some really good pointers there. If you want to generate more spin, read the situation, incorporate that technique into your game to get a little bit more check around the greens. Right, James, let's get straight into it. I think it's fair to say that amateur golfers around the greens really struggle with their strike. We see a lot of players thinning it over the green, chunking it in front of them. So how can we help golfers increase the margin for error on their wedge shots and strike their wedges cleanly more consistently?
I think the first hurdle to get over mentally is that it doesn't have to be perfect, or shouldn't need to be, if you can build in some degree of margin for error with these shots. And I'm going to look at this from two perspectives. First off, a little bit of a technique hint as to how the margin for error can grow. And secondly, obviously your wedge selection, wedge choice, the sole, and how to actually utilize that more effectively.
Yeah.
So if you jump into the technical side of things, I have no real issue with somebody making contact with the ground behind the golf ball.
Right.
Which
surprise a lot of people, right?
Yeah, exactly. It takes people aback at first in lessons. I think because most people have a negative experience of striking the ground behind the ball. But if you deliver the club effectively, you can build in some margin back there and still hit an effective shot. Now, it might not be the most sexy low spin you've ever hit in your life, but it will be on the green, it'll be under control.
Yeah.
And I think the key aspect to that is to actually control the depth of the swing, or the depth of low point. People think about low point and contact point on the ground as a forward-backward thing. I try and reframe it as more of an up and down. Now, if my club is heading to a spot that's this far under the turf, it doesn't matter what kind of bounce, what kind of sole I have on my club, it's not going to save you. Because if I'm heading to a very low spot and I hit back here, I'm in trouble. So essentially what we need to do is raise the low point of the swing up. Okay. And you can do that in a few technical ways. I think maybe the most simple that I'll show you today would be to actually have this end of the club start to rise more through impact. But the opposite of that obviously would be driving this end of the club down.
Right.
A lot of people get kind of stuck in that rut of driving the club forwards and downwards to try and get their strike, and their margin actually gets smaller and smaller the more they do it. Okay, so raising the butt of the club up through impact is going to help the low point come up, and the contact point on the ground can be a little bit further back than maybe players expect.
Wow, really.
And if you want to actually be able to utilise the sole of the club, we need that low point up. Okay. So I'll just jump in and demonstrate.
Yeah, let's see one in action for sure.
Okay, so my rehearsal, I'm actually not really focused on the ball at all. What I'm focused on is my ground contact interaction. So I'm going to look at starting a ground contact, maybe one golf ball back. And from that point, I'm going to raise the butt of the club up as I move through. And that's going to prevent me sticking the club in the ground.
Okay.
So you could hear the sound there. It was obviously ground, then ball, but the flight was still good. It's rolled down to 4 feet. I think I'm going to take that most of the time.
So let's move on to like the technique around the sole of the club and how we can make it a bit more friendly in terms of how it interacts with the ground and how we can change our setup potentially to implement that in our games.
Yep. So we're kind of getting into maybe the shaft lean topic a little bit, and people assuming that because from this face on camera, let's say they have a significant amount of forward lean, means that they're not engaging bounce anymore. Now that only holds true if the club face is square to target or even slightly close to target. If you're the kind of player that does deliver that, then forward lean is probably going to hurt you a little bit, especially if that forward lean number is more than the bounce angle on the club. But if you happen to be an open face player at all, so if I put a lot of forward lean on and rotate the face open, the bounce number increases incredibly quickly. So you can actually deliver a club leaning towards target with an open face and still engage a ton of bounce. So delivered a good amount of lean, but you can see I've left nothing, no mark on the ground. It's not dug in at all.
So there you go, pretty good result there. Hopefully that's given you some food for thought in terms of your technique around the green with the wedges to make the sole on your club work for you. Right, James, so I think every golfer knows they need some wedges in their bag, but with all the different options when it comes to wedges, lofts, bounce, grind, all that sort of thing, it can be difficult for golfers to know exactly what's going to work for them. And a good starting point, I would suggest, is using this new Ping WebFit Wedge app, which is going to give us some recommendations based on some questions that we answer. So let's go through that process and you can talk through some of the questions they're asking and why that's important in terms of choosing the right wedges for you. So it should take less than 2 minutes. We'll give it a try. First question is asking me, what is my average score? I'm going to go 74 on a good day. Don't laugh at that one, please. And now it's asking us, what is my pitching wedge carry distance? So why would the app be asking us that?
Yep, so it's looking at providing gapping information for you. So to fill the gap from whatever distance your pitching wedge carries down to partial wedge shots. So as a longer hitter, potentially that gap is bigger and you might need more wedges. Perfect,
so 132 yards for me. What is my highest lofted wedge? So that's a 58-degree wedge for me. Why would it be asking us that?
Just get an idea of what kind of shots you almost like to play around the green, whether you'd like to play high shots, low shots.
Okay, cool. And now it's asking me, what are my typical turf conditions? I think this is a really important question. Yep. Talk us through some of the considerations around that.
Yeah, so obviously in the UK, we're just looking really at maybe length of grass and whether it's hard or soft ground, but we start to go abroad, you go to the US and you start to deal with Bermuda, we have different strains of grass. So it's looking to get an idea of the turf you play off, because that will then lead towards the bounce and grinds that will be most suitable for you. Okay, so I'm going to go with medium for that. And it's now asking me what my typical sand conditions are. So I tend to play my bunker shots with my highest lofted wedge, 58. Why would whether it's soft, medium or firm sand, why would that have an impact on how I would choose my wedge? Yeah, so that's in short, that's going to influence how the club interacts with the sand. All right, if the sand is firm, the club is going to kick out more easily, versus something that is deeper, heavier, the club is going to go through it much more slowly. So if I was playing in quite firm sand, quite tight sand, how would I adjust my wedge setup? Typically you would go towards a lower bounce wedge. Okay, to get the leading edge under the sand, essentially. Yeah, because the club, if you have a lot of bounce, it's really trying to help the club out of the sand, which is probably the opposite of what you need when there's barely any sand in there. Okay, cool. So we'll go with medium for that, because that's kind of typically what my bunkers are like. Now we're talking about typical
divot length. And again, a really important factor. Why is it asking us that?
It's going to give some indication of attack angle and the shaft lean or loft you deliver. So in short, the kind of longer, the deeper the divot, the steeper a player would expect them to be.
Yeah, I think golfers don't really play a lot of heed to their divots, and I think it's a really good thing to notice when you hit some chip and pitch shots around the green. See whether your divots are shallow or deep, because that has an indication of your technique. So I'm going to go for medium for me on that one. It's now building my grind profile, but it's first asking me what my preferred pitch shot technique is, whether it's with a square face or an open face. Why is it asking us that?
Yeah, but again, we're looking at the implications with bounce that you need, grind that you need.
So if you play your pitch shots with an open face?
More open face, typically you could potentially play a lower bounce wedge.
Okay, so I tend to play my pitch shots with a square face, so we'll go with square face. Now it's asking us what my typical ball position is on a pitch shot, so middle back or middle forward. Why is it asking us that?
Yep, again, that will give us some kind of insight into attack angle, typically, all things being equal, which is going to help, again, ascertain bounce required.
Yeah, so if your ball is back, you're probably going to be a little bit steeper.
Yes, and you're probably going to need a little bit more help.
Need a little bit more bounce.
Yeah.
Okay, so I tend to be a middle forward type of golfer, so let's put that in to the app. It's now asking what my highest priority is with my most lofted wedge. Definitely for me, it's bunker play. That's kind of pretty much the only situation I use my highest lofted wedge on. It's now going to finalise my grind profile. Comes the moment of truth. Okay, so obviously we know with the Ping Eye S159 wedge in particular, there's 6 different grinds available, so there's a lot of options out there. The app selector tool gives you 2 options to then go and try. It's recommending an E-sole for me in the 58, which is obviously the more bunker specific sole, and an S grind as well. So there you go, I've gone through that process. It's taken hardly any time at all. It's completely free, and it's thrown up some really interesting kind of selections in terms of guiding me into some wedge designs that are going to work for me. And if you're struggling to choose your wedges, if you want some initial guidance, definitely check out the Ping WebFit wedge app. It's going to give you some really useful information. Right, so let's move on to pitching, something I think is a bit of an underrated skill in golf. There's nothing worse than getting within 50 yards on a par 5 and walking off with 6. So let's try and help the viewers pitching technique. What are the sort of mistakes that people make when it comes to pitching, and how are we going to go about fixing those?
Yeah, so I think maybe a good way to frame it is if you were going to throw a ball from A to B, you probably wouldn't launch it as high as you could to get it to cover the distance. You'd actually launch it fairly flat. I think the most obvious thing to look at is when players are trying to launch the ball high, because they misunderstand maybe how to play these shots, typically they're trying to add loft through impact, so they start to lose shaft lean too quickly and present too much loft to the golf ball. So the most simplistic way to bring your ball flight down is obviously to deliver more shaft lean at impact. Now, the most basic way to do it is play the ball further back than normal if you're a player that launches it too high. If you play it central, you need to perhaps pivot a little bit better, learn to hold a little bit more angle in this wrist to actually have the club leaning forwards and deliver less loft.
Okay. So let's see one here. We're at the Pavenham Park Golf Club, your excellent short game area. You're just going to pitch one to this first flag, which I think is, well, the first green, which is 40 yards away. So let's see one here where you're going to bring the flight down on this one. And hopefully you're not going to shank it into my legs. I'm standing quite close to you.
Temptation level is very high right now, Joel.
Brilliant. You can see that actually came out a lot lower than I was expecting it to, and it still stopped on that green, that tiny green. Yeah, so we're looking at, if you do have access to a launch monitor of any kind, we're looking probably 28 to 31 degrees as the window, which is much flatter than most people actually realise. Okay. Really interesting. Okay, so we've brought the flight down. Now we need to control our distances, and you were talking about golfers relying most heavily on field, but I think most golfers probably need some sort of system to be able to give them options when it comes to pitching and hitting those different distances. Yeah,
some kind of basic clock face. So essentially, I would look at your core shot, or things to base things off, as left arm parallel to the ground. So it'd be 9 o'clock on the clock face. So the process to go through is really to figure out how far that goes, and then we can take something off. So you could end up with something that's more like 7:30, and then perhaps up to 10:30. So that'd be 3 wedge distances straight away.
And then obviously if you've got 3 different wedges, that's 9 different distances.
Exactly.
Along with your full shots. The final thing we were talking about was when you're trying to get maximum distance out of it, the ball goes too high, the ball flight can be hit by the wind and different things. So we're trying to hit lower lofted wedges, a bit more under control.
When you are swinging more full out, there's more potential for a miss hit, because your technique's usually going to suffer a little bit. Then the ball will start to launch high, so you start to put more effort into the shot. It launches higher and you still don't really get much more distance out of it. And like I said at the beginning, if you want to get the ball from A to B most easily, the last thing you want to do is throw it right up in the air.
Okay, so you'd recommend coming down in loft,
coming down a more
controlled swing. So maybe we can see you on there to this.
Yes, I'll switch to my 55. Here we go. Beautiful.
Seamless.
So we go to the 80-yard green.
Yeah.
So I'm probably not going to be a long way past the 9 o'clock swing here. Shouldn't have to force it.
Nicely under control there. Low ball flight, one bounce.
Onto
Right
the
on the middle of that green. Happy with that one?
I'll take it, yeah.
There you go. So 3 really useful tips there if you are struggling with your pitch shots that should help you attack those flags. Right, James, we've already given our viewers some great short game advice, but if there was one drill that you could give golfers to go and try for themselves, it's going to have the biggest impact on their short game performance, what would it be and why?
Yeah, so it's going to be it's actually a finish position drill, or checkpoint, but we're going to turn that checkpoint into a drill. So I like to teach players to get into a finish position that essentially means they've ticked 3 boxes. Those would be to make sure they've used their body correctly, they've done a good job with their arms, and their release has been synced up with those other 2 things. So I'll talk you through it if you're in a great position to see it.
Okay.
So no backswing, I'm just going to turn through to target, and I want you to observe how I've turned my chest fully. My arms are still kind of soft in beside me, the club is aligned with my centre, and obviously I've got this coat hanger that you will have noticed pointing at the centre of my body. All right, so it becomes a drill when you start to involve a training aid or tool. Now obviously everyone has coat hangers. Yeah. I assume you could use something else. You could use a stick in the end of your club, you could hold a stick beside it, but this is light and easy for convenience. Yeah. So as long as you tick those 3 boxes, rotation, arm position and shaft positioned, you won't have cheated your release, like over release, you won't have dragged it, you won't have sent your arms across your body too fast, and you have to pivot effectively. Okay, so decent contact, good flight, and I can look down, immediate feedback, arm position is good. Yeah. Chest is pivoted, and my release must have been in time. Yeah, I can see that shaft pointing right at the middle of your body. It's not too far one way or the other. So exactly, it's all nicely connected. You've done everything you need to do. So there you go. There's a really easy practice drill for you to try. Get a coat hanger, put it in your grip, hit some chip shots, achieve those 3 checkpoints in your finish position, and hopefully your scores will start to tumble. So there you have it. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and it's given you a few pointers that you can go and try out on the golf course to help you get up and down a little bit more often and save some shots around the green. But that's all from me and James from the short game area at Pavement Park Golf Club. We'll see you next time.